Well, hey fellas, Happy New Year. Mr. Halter here, coming from an office. It's a new podcast room, sporting the special hoodie sweatshirt that Tyler gave me way back in the day. Don't tell him, it's now my painting hoodie. So today we're doing a little painting. It's minus 28 here in the St. Louis area. And so hopefully you're enjoying where you live. If everything else is going wrong in your life, just be thankful that you don't live here, because this is absolutely terrible. All right. Well, we are Philippians in the back half of chapter 2. And I have to be honest with you, I'm a little upset that Caleb took chapter 2. Philippians is my favorite book, and chapter 2 of Philippians has always been sort of my life passage. And a little upset that he got to work you through that. But it's what we call the cruciform way of Jesus, that Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he takes the form of a man, and then he becomes a servant, and then he dies. So it's a descending journey. I know that you guys have heard me talk about this, but sometimes when people ask me about what the Christian faith is really about, sometimes I'll ask them, do you think it's about self-actualizing? Like a lot of the stuff you'd hear today, especially about men's stuff, would be about, getting the most that you can out of yourself in this one life that you have. That's what we would call self-actualize or actualization. Is Christianity for that? Is it so that we'll have the best life ever? Or is it, on the other side, more about a discipline or a suffering? And if you ever wondered about that, it's both. But Jesus paints it this way: if anybody wants to find their life, they have to lose it. And so he's not saying that if you put your faith in Jesus, your life is just going to absolutely suck because he's just going to beat you into submission and have you do all sorts of really hard, terrible things. It's not that at all. But for sure, he's going to ask us to carry the weight of pain in the world. So there's going to be something related to that. But it also is meant for us to become better and experience more of what we call Zoe, or abundant life. And so it's both. And the cruciform formula here in chapter 2, a descending, not like using Jesus to build up our lives, but taking on the life of Jesus as he goes low and lower and lower and lower, and eventually gives his life for the world. So we are to empty ourselves, and in that emptying, we somehow find something that most men can't find. And so it's both. And as we get into this, I just thought about an experience I had literally 3 weeks ago. It's in my adult life, is probably the best 2 hours I've ever had. We had just finished up a book that we call Brave Cities. It's sort of the story of what we're doing here in Alton. And we were trying to get endorsements from different leaders around the world. And both me and my partner were deeply impacted by a guy named Dr. John Perkins. Dr. John Perkins had a third grade education, but ends up with about 13 honorary doctorates from different universities around the world. He started CCDA, Christian Community Development Association. He's the same exact age as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and was a part of all of that. He lives in Jackson, Mississippi, the seat of all of the crud of the racial injustice movement. But he was in all that. He's been beaten to the point of death several times, like the Apostle Paul. He's now 94. And we thought, I wonder if we could get Dr. Perkins' endorsement of this book. So we called his son, Derek, who's about my age, in his late 50s. And he said, Dad's old. Every day's like a mystery or a miracle. He said, but if you'd like to make the 8-hour drive, I'll see if I can get Dad out of bed. And so me and my buddy Taylor, we grabbed another partner that does a lot of the same work in a really rough part of town outside of Pittsburgh. And we said, let's just drive over. So we all drove over, and we spent a good chunk of the drive. In fact, we got to where we were laughing about it. But we were asking each other, why are we doing all this? Why are we we're sort of committing our lives to work with the poor and all the troubles related to that? And quite frankly, we were licking each other's wounds. We were trying to make each other feel better. But when we got to Dr. Perkins, he woke up and he met with us, and it was like an amazing. I wish I could tell you all the stuff that happened and that he said. But one of the questions that we asked him was, sir, in all those years of all that you went through in trying to guide a racial justice movement in America during some of the worst stuff that our country has seen, did you ever think about quitting? And he started laughing, but he also started crying at the same time. And he said, every day, all day, young man, every day, all day, he thought about why was he doing this and the suffering. He still lives in the same exact house on one of the worst streets in Jackson, Mississippi. I think they had 5 drive-by shootings right by his house just a few weeks ago. So he's always been in the middle of the worst of the worst, and he just goes every day, all day. And we said, well, then what's kept you going? Like, why would you take on extra lifting? You know, most of the world doesn't ever want to try to help anything, but why would you have stuck with it? He said, just Jesus and my wife. And so there's something about the Jesus story that deeply impacted this man. He's written so many books for the justice movement in America. And so here we come to this passage where it had just told us to descend, to empty yourself like Jesus, and be willing to not be about yourself, but be about other people. And then it kind of goes into how to do that. So I just want to read a little bit. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Another translation I wrote down says, work hard to show the result of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. So it's not sort of like, hey, make sure you're saved and, toe the line so you don't lose your salvation. That's not it at all. It's actually let people know about your salvation by, how you obey God. And so it's kind of laying the framework for what it means to actually empty yourself. And he says, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work according to his good pleasure. A great thought about why we should even let God conform us to his image, which means there will be some discipline, why we would even let God ask us to do harder things in this world than most people would, is because of the privilege of knowing that God started a work in us and he's going to carry it on to completion. So if you ever go, okay, why am I doing it? Like for Dr. Perkins to go, I'm doing this because of Jesus. That's the right answer. He would have laughed and we would laugh if people said, oh, you're doing what you're doing in Alton to fix Alton. We're like, no, we're definitely not doing this to fix Alton or to really fix people. It hardly ever works, So people will ask, well, then why are you doing it? Well, because Jesus did it. And he says that we find him when we do this type of work. And so to me, the answer is always Jesus. Like, I just want to be where he would be, and I want to be in his presence. I want to abide with him. And if he's over there across the street with those people, then for me to abide with him means I got to go over there with those people too. And so, so he continues to go on. So work out your salvation with fear and trembling. He says, do all things without grumbling or disputing. So that's the key to this whole thing. Because then he says, then you'll be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in a crooked and twisted generation. You will shine like stars. So like, what would be the remarkable, unique characteristic of a man of God that empties himself? It's like you guys will shine like stars in like this galaxy of darkness. Like nobody else is doing this, but just a little bit of a man that is emptying himself. And what would make you stand apart is that you don't grumble or complain. Now, this morning, this was tested. We just got a brand new Labrador puppy over Christmas. So it's probably, I don't know, it's very small. It's mostly head and teeth and tail. It mostly eats and craps. That's what it does. But it's been kind of fun. I'll be honest with you. Cheryl and I have enjoyed it, except for today. It's been getting up 3 times a night, sometimes 2, but it starts yiping. And so I have to get up in the middle of the night, just like I used to with the kids, and I have to let it go out and go to the bathroom. Well, today was 28 degrees below zero. And the dog went out, but it normally comes flying back in because it's freezing. And this time it didn't. All of a sudden, we have a mom Labrador, mom leads, and then the puppy follows. This time, mom comes in and there's no puppy. And we've got coyotes and we got owls, we got all those sorts of things. And I shut the door. I'm like, okay, it better be coming. Puppy doesn't come. Well, for whatever reason, I don't want to get into it, but I don't sleep with pajamas, so I'm buck naked, and it's minus 28. But I'm worried about this dumb puppy, so I have to literally walk out into. It's windy too, minus 28 and windy, and I don't even have slippers on. I'm dancing over frozen gravel and ice, looking for this dog out in the blowing wind. So you can imagine when I finally found it, grabbed it by the scruff, and got us both back inside. I was grumbling and complaining a bit. Okay, there was some murmuring going on. It was probably indistinguishable because my teeth were chattering, but I wasn't happy. This scripture isn't about like little grumbles, okay? Sometimes you need to grumble a little bit when things don't work out that great, just to give yourself a little moment of levity. We're not talking about this. We're talking about where a man lives under this constant thought that I don't have what I'd like to have, and so I'm going to grumble and complain, or I'm going to slander other people, or I'm just going to constantly be grumpy because life isn't going that well. That's what it's talking about. So as you descend and you empty your life for the works of God in the world, and just simply for Him, because He started this beautiful work in you, take on this unique characteristic that you do not, or just put it this way, you have this sense that God's at work, and so whatever's going on, it could be bad or good or great or terrible, that God's still at work, and so you don't have this sense of grumble or complain. You have a sense of just, I'm in a good spot because I'm with the Lord. And so as we were talking with Dr. Perkins, it was very interesting. When we got done, we had about 2 hours with this man. And as we were leaving, we had given him a hug, and we had thanked him profusely for being willing to read the book and to give us some of his time. And I went into the kitchen because their caregiver was there, and I just wanted to say, hey, thank you for getting to know you a little bit. And I said, what's life like around the house? And he said, well, Mrs. Perkins, she's still alive. He said she is able to wake up once a day, and we get her out, and we put Dr. Perkins at this little, very humble little table in the kitchen, and we wheelchair her in, and they sit together. And she said mostly, Mrs. Perkins can make it 15, 20 minutes, and then she falls asleep. And because she could pass away at any moment. And Dr. Perkins, she said, we'll talk to her for about 2 hours. And then he's exhausted, and then she said they don't see each other the rest of the day. And then every day that's what we do. So the big moment of the day is his time with his wife. And so as we were leaving, we were literally at the door. We said, thank you, sir. God bless you. And he said, young man, would you please come back? Can I just ask you to pray for me? And I remember thinking, like, okay, then we better pray. And I think he saw us getting in like prayer position, like about to come around him. And he said, no, not right now. He said, would you just pray for me all the time? And we said, anything particular? And he said, yeah, I don't want to die before my wife dies. And he goes, I know my time is any moment, but I don't want her to be here without me. And then he said something that changed me forever. He said, would you also pray for my faith? And I didn't know quite what he meant, but he was very emotional. He said, I'm afraid I just need help with my faith. There's a 94-year-old absolute warrior that's been through stuff that would make most of us just like tuck tail and run. And this guy has locked his jaw and run into the face of violence. And here he is going, pray for me that my faith will stay strong. Later on, in fact, that week after, he kept calling me and Taylor. And his son Derek said, something about you guys is helping my dad have faith again. And I was like, Derek, is your dad really struggling? He said, yeah, he's always had this like tenuous, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough for the Lord? But he said, yeah, as he's gotten older, he said he just is afraid. And there's a beauty to it, and there's a humility to it. Like, he doesn't want to let the Lord down or let his wife down. And I just remember thinking, holy cow, here we come up driving, thinking about all that we're doing, and we're complaining, and we're kind of grumbling that it doesn't work. And and just meeting this one man, like literally like a living representation of a man that has lived without grumbling or complaining, but still has these deep internal insecurities and thoughts about meeting Jesus and leaving his friends and people that he loves. It's like the first time I'd ever seen this passage where Paul is saying right here at the end, like, I fought the good fight. And then he refers back to the same thing. He said, I'm like a poured out drink offering. And if you've ever studied that, it's a beautiful image. A poured out drink offering was in the Old Testament when people would sacrifice to make amends so that God would accept them. At the end of the animal sacrifice usually would be like a wine sacrifice or a pouring out of wine. And unless you did the pouring out of wine, the sacrifice wasn't good enough. It's a metaphor for what Jesus did. His body was essentially the sacrifice, like sacrificing of an animal. He, like an unblemished lamb, went and took our sins. But the blood of Jesus is like the wine offering. And so Paul is saying at the end of his life, just like Dr. Perkins, that I'm good. I'm good if I've poured my life out for you. Now, Jesus pours out his life for the sins of all humanity. Paul was saying, since we don't get to do that, we don't even have to. So we don't have to atone for the sins of people, but we do get this opportunity to pour our lives out as unto the Lord, as like a drink offering for him. And what we pour ourselves out for is for his purposes and for the people that he loves. And that's why we take a descending road through life. We don't take an upwardly mobile, get as much as we can. We're willing to actually take a punch in the face if we need to help the cause of injustice. And we give a little bit more money away than the average Joe because we believe that we should, and we should be generous. So we take it in the shorts there. We let more people into our homes, and we have dinners with folks that maybe other folks want to have dinners with. And we try to lift up the head of those that are struggling, and yeah, we carry weight that other people don't do. And so to me, this passage is so beautiful that we maybe would get to the end of our lives, maybe 94, and we would go, pray for me. Dad's tired, but Dad doesn't want to go because I really want to be here to help you guys as much as we can. So I don't know, the Dr. Perkins was the best 2 hours of my ministry life, and it really helped make this passage come alive for me. I hope that you will be men that make that passage come alive to other men, that they'll go, there's something about these cats at Men's Fraternity that, man, they just got a different perspective. So anyway, we'll continue in chapter 3 next week, but love you guys. I'll hopefully see you at the retreat. Men, sign up for that, dang it. It's an unbelievable time, and I'm going to fly out and just try to get some encouragement from you guys. So I love you guys. Take care.